How comforting to know that God's presence is with us in every circumstance in our life. From being thrown into a pit, sold and treated as a slave, to being elevated to second in command in the kingdom of Egypt, everything good in Joseph's life was connected to God's presence. Today, on Enjoying the Journey, Scott Pauley leads us through a study on the life of Joseph, where we will learn how to live in the presence of God. Be sure to stay tuned after today's study to learn more about Scott's book on the life of Joseph entitled, The Lord Was with Joseph.
What would you like to characterize your life if you could boil it all down to one thing and say one thing was the defining characteristic of your life? What would you want it to be? Let me testify today and say I want it to be what Joseph's life was characterized by. He was characterized by the presence of Almighty God. The presence of God, my friends, is the determining, distinguishing characteristic of the blessed life, and it is not just for Joseph, it is for all of God's children. We return today to the book of Genesis, and now to Genesis chapter number 37, where the drama really begins, where the narrative account of Joseph's life is recorded for us. And we begin our reading in Genesis 37, verse 1, "And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report." Now, let's just begin here today, shall we? We're talking about learning to live in the presence of God. And I want to say to you that if you're going to learn to live in God's presence, then you have to see God in all the details of life. God is always previous. He really is the first cause. So let's back up. Even before Jacob, there was Jehovah. Before there was this land that they were living in, there was the Lord. Look behind the scenes, behind the curtain, behind all the things that you think and the people that you think are touching your life right now, and begin to see the Lord in your life. And I really believe that starts by seeing the Lord in your past. So many people that I meet get fixated on their past, but for some reason, though they're fixed on their past, they can never seem to bring into focus that the Lord was at work there. So they get stuck in the past. It could be in past battles, and they got sour over something and never got over it. It could be past blemishes, some great failure in their life, and they never got beyond it. You have to learn to get past your past. It could even be that you're stuck in some past blessing. You're living on yesterday's blessings, and you're missing what the Lord has for you today. You have to see God at work in your past and then believe that the God who was at work in the past was doing all of that to get you ready for the present. You see, the eternal God is at once in the past, the present, and the future. Let that sink in for just a minute. He's in the eternal now. That's how he sees the end from the beginning. God is not in time. Time is in God. The eternal God holds time in the palm of his hand. So we talk about life in the past, the present, the future, but the Lord is at work in all of it. And God, who is the eternal one, is working to bring all things together for his glory and for our good. So here is Joseph. Look at his past for just a moment. See the Lord in his past. I think the first thing that jumps off the page at me is that you have to see the Lord in where this man was born. In verse number 1, he was born in the land of Canaan. And that is very, very significant because you remember, Canaan was the land of promise. This was the place that God had promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and now to his father, Jacob. So he's living in the land of promise. If we could simply remember that our God is a God of promise and that our God always fulfills everything he foretells. He keeps his word. That would help all of us. If you can look at your past and believe that the promises of God have never failed and they are not going to fail now, that will do your heart good. That will help you begin to, as the old Christians used to say, practice the presence of God. God is always present. You don't have to make God present. He's everywhere, and He promised to always be with His children. What we have to do, though, we have to practice living consciously in His presence. So see the Lord in where you were born. Canaan was the providential place. God had chosen it in His good providence. Let me say to you, God has you where you are at this moment, and God knows exactly what your address is. The Lord knows where you are. I remember years ago going through a season of great need, and a more mature spiritual person who was with me in this said to me at the time, the Lord knows where we are. God knows right where we live. Well, I believe that. And I want you to know that in the providence of God, God has you where you are. And I'm not just talking about geography right now. I'm talking about the circumstances of your life. And this is very interesting, but at the particular time that we find the land of Canaan in Genesis 37, it was by and large still a very unsettled place. We think of Canaan, land flowing of milk and honey, but there was a lot of unsettledness in the land of Canaan at this particular juncture. And maybe right now you're living in some unsettledness and wondering, where is God in this? Just remember this. God is at work even in the unsettled times of life. In the places where you're not sure what God is up to, God is always working His plan. Now, Canaan was not only a providential place, Canaan was a passing place. He was just there for a short time. Very shortly, Joseph is getting ready to head to Egypt. So remember this, wherever you are at this moment, you're just passing through. Very shortly, you'll be gone. Very shortly, we'll all be gone from this land, and we're moving to another place. But see God where He has you at this time. And so Canaan reminds me that it is not only a providential place and a passing place, it is a present place. God begins right where you are. Some people live their whole life thinking someday, somewhere out there, God's going to really do something in their life. I want to say to you today, the will of God is not future. The will of God is always present. And the will of God and the work of God is not in some distant land. It is always near at hand. God begins right where you are. God begins in the normal, in the mundane, in the everyday life. God's great work oftentimes begins in the most inconspicuous places. And though the land of Canaan was full of promise, I wonder if when Joseph was just a little boy, if he realized how much that the God of that land was going to work in him. And one thing I love to see in Joseph's life is that God was the same in Egypt as He was in Canaan. God was the same everywhere He sent him. And Joseph learned that early on, to see the Lord in his life. Can I challenge you today to look at your past? Don't get stuck looking at it. Look to the Lord. But as you look at your past, see God in it. See the Lord in where you were born and where you are right now. And believe that in all the twists and turns, though you can't explain it, though you may not always even like it, and you wouldn't choose it for yourself, that in the good providence of God, God is at work. And God is not just at work collectively. God is at work individually. Yes, God was working for the whole nation of Israel, for the whole family, but God was working individually in the life of Joseph. And I want to say to every man, every woman, and every young person listening to me right now, God is at work in your life. Get your attention, get your concentration off of yourself, your circumstances, others, your past, fill in the blank, whatever it is that's distracting you at this moment, and turn your attention to the Lord. See the Lord even in your past.
Too many times we compartmentalize our faith to a single day of the week, often Sunday. But the Lord desires for us to live in His presence daily. And oh, what joy we find in the Lord's presence. You can learn more about living in God's presence by visiting enjoyingthejourney.org/Joseph. There, you will find information about Scott's book entitled The Lord Was with Joseph. You can download the free digital book, access the audiobook, or purchase the hard copy version. We really believe that the Lord will use this book to help you learn how to live in God's presence. We look forward to having you with us next time on Enjoying the Journey.